some of the insidious things that they do. The Chinese regime and the intel apparatus understood the importance of regulatory decisions, right? Regulations here in the U.S. and the impact that would have on things like mining, right? Or agriculture. And so, as an example, they're not trying necessarily, no, they are, but it's not, they don't consider it the most important part. They're influencing local communities. They're influencing local politics, state politics at that level, right? To make decisions about regulations. Phosphate's a good example. It's a very good example, right? You like food, you like large-scale agriculture to feed the world, better have some phosphate, right? It's fertilizer. Yeah. So leading producers of phosphate, China, Morocco, Russia, just they're up there. But so they understood if we go in and we impact local community decisions about access to phosphate mining, right? And we promote or we encourage, through a variety of ways, right? Supporting local activist groups, supporting operations that are more on a national basis that try to do environmental concerns, right? They're trying to do good things, right? These activists in the environment, it's not like it's nefarious, and they say, if we could just cut a deal with the Chinese regime, but the Chinese regime understands this, and so through a variety of cutouts, they're able to support these groups. And next thing you know, whether it's down in Florida, with phosphate, or it's anywhere else, towns or city councils are saying, no, we don't want that. We're going to have to do something about this. Shut it down. That's an enormous benefit to a country that is the key producer of that mineral.
Why don't we go to the Far East then? Because Taiwan just had elections. They looked pretty legit. I mean, people were actually holding tickets, and there were people checking things, and it all kind of seemed like, oh, that's how it could work in functioning democracies. But there's a big situation going on with China, Taiwan, independence. Are they seeing American weakness, et cetera, et cetera? I'm just kind of handing
No,
you
you're right. You're
here.
right. It was a tidy election. It was a tidy election, and they sorted it out, and they were able to call it.
Wow.
Didn't take them months.
One day,
the problem from China's perspective is that the wrong party won. Right, so they were pushing. There were basically three parties, and they were contesting this, but there were only two that were seriously contesting it, and one was the Democratic People's Party, the DPP, and the other was the Kuomintang Party, and the Kuomintang Party is very much in favor of closer relations with China. China was very much hopeful that they would win. They didn't. The DPP won. The vice president of the DPP became, of the government became the president, the new president, William Lai. And they've been fairly vocal about the importance of Taiwan's independence. And now that word means a little something different, right? When you talk to the Taiwanese people, they can be we want Taiwan to be independent and free. They don't mean rattle the cage and be completely separate, from China. They still believe in the importance of that relationship, right? So we sometimes think about it and go, okay, they're going to have a revolution and declare their independence and everything. And it's not really what they're talking about. But even having some space between the idea of reunification, or basically Beijing taking over Taiwan, that is something that Xi Jinping won't counter. So he doesn't want to hear that.
So does it matter in a way what happens in their elections? I mean, I know at least temporarily it's good for the Taiwanese people, of course, to be able to express themselves. But ultimately, if China wants Taiwan, it's going to take Taiwan, at least with this American administration, something like that.
Yeah. I think that they've the calculation is more about is not so much about who's in the White House as how long is Xi Jinping going to stay head of China, right? I think he views the reunification idea, bringing Taiwan back into the fold, as his key legacy. So I think if you could magically figure out when he's going to finish up being, this iron-fisted ruler of China, then you could say, okay, between now and that point in time in the future, that's when something's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to be, military. China doesn't want to have to worry about a military takeover. And they've talked about this, sort of the soft approach. And you can kind of see what they did with Hong Kong, right? That was accelerated and helped in part by the pandemic, right? We were all over here looking, at this, and they kind of stamped out the last vestiges of democracy, during that time, and it happened. Right now, that's a little bit different, right? In a sense, because Hong Kong was always sort of temporarily leased, sort of, right? There was always a sense that it was going back,
right?
And so it's not quite the same, but they brutally stamped out the democracy movement there. And so I think, their view on Taiwan, despite the fact that there's almost no distance, in the strait there between the two, is they don't want to do it militarily. And I think, they are intent on doing it. They've been very clear, particularly during the past year. Xi has made some very clear statements that it is inevitable, is what he's saying. And so, the Taiwanese people look at that and go, and there's some that want that reunification, but the majority want things to be essentially the way they are, right?
And it sort of seems like if they think Trump's coming back in a year, they might want to escalate the speed of that, right? That's what Xi might want to do.
There could be that calculation, but they play a longer game. We take everything in very small bite-sized chunks. That doesn't typically happen in China. They play, whether it's this sort of issue or whether it's an intelligence operation or anything, they play a real long game, So I don't think we want to read too much into just a change in administration.
What does generally sane China policy look like to you? Like, I think people hear what you said about Iran, and it's like you can sort of like make sense of it in your brain. It's like, there are weapons in these places. There are trade routes being shot at. There's people being murdered. That's not how we look at China. China's doing a lot of other things related to technology, related to releasing COVID, let's say. Like, there's some other stuff, but it's a little more TikTok. It's a little more amorphous versus just like military stations in countries.
Right. TikTok has been, people talk about TikTok. The Chinese regime would never allow their children to have access to TikTok, right? They have a different WeChat,
right?
Which is a cleaned up version,
right?
So
it's not on my phone; it's on that guy's phone over there.
Oh, yeah.
And I told him he didn't have to do it, but he wanted
he
to.
Did. Okay. Yeah.
But what is like sensible policy related to all that? Related to like an information war that's happening to our young people?
Yeah.
And
I will say that one of the things that the previous president, that Trump did, love him or hate him, right? He's as a personality, he's not my cup of tea. I lived in New York for a long time. People in New York who had a chance to watch it, he's a tri-state area developer.
That's
right?
where I'm from.
Exactly. So you get punched in the nose, you punch the other guy in the nose. I mean, people there knew what was happening and what the guy was going to be like. Nobody thought he was going to suddenly become a sophisticated, thoughtful individual who was going to be presidential. But one of the things that he did that was very smart and I think very useful was to elevate the conversation around China, right? And to put a spotlight on just how much damage the Chinese regime and their intel apparatus has done over the decades, right? In terms of theft of intellectual property, the cost of that to us and to our allies, to the West, and just the outright theft of research and development, right?
Fentanyl. I mean,
fentanyl. Yeah. I mean, so that's a whole separate, counter narcotics issue that, but it's their intelligence operations, it's their economic espionage. Those things have done damage that we can't even calculate the cost of over decades, in terms of lost opportunity, lost jobs, lost revenue streams that could have supported and built up other countries, other businesses. They're incredibly aggressive, and then what they've been doing while we again kind of get focused in one area, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, domestic concerns, whatever it might be, we have a hard time, it seems, multitasking. And again, with their longer view, they have a strategy. And so they've spent a couple of decades now traveling around the world. People, for the most part, know about this Belt and Road Initiative that China has. But they've been going around locking up, as an example, mining rights, right, in South America or in Africa, for key minerals, right? Critical and rare earth minerals. And it's the critical minerals that are really more important. I always thought, well, we call it rare earth, and people think, well, those are the important ones. And you're thinking, well, it's more really the critical minerals. They've been locking up those opportunities, right? They have a monopoly on processing of key minerals that we're never going to get to 100% green because we don't have the ability to process, much less mine, but to process and refine those minerals for things that we need, such as, I don't know, batteries, right? And so you hear this talk about, battery technology and how we're all going to go in that direction. And that's great. We should be doing lots of different things, right, for energy. But the Chinese knew that years ago, and they had a plan, and they've been doing this. And they also do other things. They do things that are more insidious than just going around and cutting deals, right? Usually it's in a sort of a usury situation where the country finds out that they're doing a deal with that country, then finds out a few years later that they're completely in debt, can't afford the loans, end up having to give up more, right? But some of the insidious things that they do, the Chinese regime and the intel apparatus understood the importance of regulatory decisions, right? Regulations here in the U.S. and the impact that would have on things like mining, right? Or agriculture. And so as an example, they're not trying necessarily, no, they are, but they don't consider it the most important part. They're influencing local communities. They're influencing local politics, state politics at that level, right? To make decisions about regulations. Phosphate's a good example. It's a very good example, right? You like food, like large-scale agriculture to feed the world, better have some phosphate, right? It's fertilizer. Yeah. So leading producers of phosphate, China, Morocco, Russia, they're up there. But so they understood if we go in and we impact local community decisions about access to phosphate mining, right? And we promote or we encourage, through a variety of ways, right? Supporting local activist groups, supporting operations that are more on a national basis that try to do environmental concerns, right? They're trying to do good things, right? These activists in the environment, it's not like it's nefarious, and they say, if we could just cut a deal with the Chinese regime, but the Chinese regime understands this, and so through a variety of cutouts, they're able to support these groups. And next thing you know, whether it's down in Florida, with phosphate, or it's anywhere else, towns or city councils are saying, no, we don't want that. We're going to have to do something about this. Shut it down. That's an enormous benefit to a country that is the key producer of that mineral. So that's something that they do, and I've been fascinated by that because it shows this long view. And from an operational perspective, sometimes the problems with the CIA is that we tend to have a shorter view, right? We're Americans, and so that's just a tendency. And so our operations tend to have a shorter time frame concern, right? We don't sometimes think about putting in the hard work of 10 to 20 years or 25 years to develop an asset, right? Or to develop a program that's going to eventually produce results.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.